Okay, so today we will look at the viscera of the lungs. As we know, the human body has two lungs, the right lung and the left lung. To identify both lungs, we will have to look at their impressions, their properties, and then we will be able to identify which lung is which. And in order to start our first identification, let us start with the left lung. This is the left lung of a human body because the left lung, generally a lung has an anterior border and a posterior border. This is the anterior border. This entire part is the anterior border and this entire part is the posterior border. How can we come to the conclusion that this is the anterior border? Because the anterior border is sharp while the posterior border is rounded. That's why this is the anterior border and this is the posterior border. On the left lung, the anterior border has a cardiac notch. The anterior border has a cardiac notch. If we try to zoom in a bit, you will see here that this little notch over here is a cardiac notch, and this extensive amount of this extensive amount of this extensive amount of the lung that is hanging from the left lung is the lingula. And if we look at the right lung, we will be able to see that the anterior border, which is sharp, does not have any sort of cardiac notch and it does not have any lingula. Now we will talk about fissure. The right lung has two fissures, this horizontal fissure and this oblique fissure. This oblique fissure originates from the posterior border and ends at the diaphragmatic border. While on the left lung, you will see that there is only an oblique border. Because of this, the right lung is divided into three lobes: this lobe, and this lobe. While the left lung is divided into two lobes, the upper lobe and the lower lobe. Now, we will talk about the surfaces of lungs. If we have to talk about the surface of the lungs, we will have to isolate one lung. Let us isolate the left lung. If you isolate any lung, regardless whether it is left or right, we will see that the lung has two surfaces on the exterior part. One is the costal surface and the other is the medial surface. The costal surface has impressions caused by the ribs and intercostal spaces. These impressions couldn't be identified in this image, but on an actual lung, we can see that the impressions are present. These impressions include elevations caused by the intercostal spaces and depressions caused by the first costal ribs. If we isolate the right lung, we will see that there is a bit of a small notch type of area over here. This small notch type of area here is actually the depression caused by the first costal rib. Now, since we know that the lung has two surfaces, the costal surface and the medial surface, the medial surface also has two parts. One is the vertebral surface and the other is the mediastinum surface. The vertebral surface has an impression caused by the vertebral column, while the mediastinum surface has a cardiac impression caused by the heart. Now, if we look at both the right and the left lung, we will find that the cardiac impression caused on the left lung is actually a lot deeper and wider, while the cardiac impression caused on the right lung is actually shallower and smaller. Why? Because most of the heart is actually surrounded by the left lung. And now we will talk about the anatomical points of the lungs. Since the lung has two surfaces and three borders, we will first identify where these borders are directed or faced. Now, if we look at any lung, regardless of right or left, we will see that there is a conical apex. This conical apex is directed upwards, and there is the inferior border. This inferior border or diaphragmatic border is directed downwards. It is concave in shape, and it can also be said that it's comma shaped and is sharp, while the anterior sharp anterior border is facing anteriorly and the round posterior border is facing posteriorly. That being said, now we will talk about the surfaces. There is the coastal surface and there is the medial surface. The coastal surface is marked by impressions caused by the intercostal spaces and intercostal spaces and ribs. The elevations are caused by the intercostal spaces and the depressions are caused by the ribs. While on the medial surface, we will see that there are two parts. The medial part, the vertebral part, the vertebral surface and the mediastinal surface. The vertebral surface has an impression caused by the vertebral column, and the mediastinal surface has an impression caused by the heart, which is called the cardiac impression. Now, we will look at the hilum of two lungs. If we look at the hilum of two lungs, we will find on a real lung, we will find that the right lung has actually the hilum of the right lung has actually five openings, and the hilum of the left lung has four openings. Why? Because the hilum of the right lung consists of two cartilaginous bronchus, a pulmonary artery, and two pulmonary veins. While on the left lung, we will find that there is only one cartilaginous bronchus, a pulmonary artery, and two pulmonary veins. Now, the pulmonary artery is actually circular or round shape, while the pulmonary veins are actually closed, which is why we will be able to identify which are the pulmonary artery and which are the pulmonary veins. That being said, now we will look at the impressions caused by other arteries and veins. If we look at both the lungs, first we have to isolate the left lung. If we look at the left lung, we will see that there are two impressions over here. Two impressions. One impression is caused by the esophagus, and the other impression over here is caused by the trachea. This impression is caused by the esophagus, and this impression is caused by the trachea. And if we also look at there are also other impressions present over here. This entire impression is actually caused by the arch of aorta. This is the arch of aorta, and this is the descending thoracic aorta. The arch of aorta has three branches, of which two branch, the left common carotid artery and the left subclavian artery, are facing upwards, and these create an impression over here which cannot be seen in this image because it's not an actual lung, but can actually be present in an actual lung. That being said, now we will look at the right lung. If we look at the right lung, we will see that the right lung also has a lot of impressions. If we look at this impression over here, this impression originates from the posterior border. This is the arch of azygos vein, which ends at the superior vena cava over here. The superior vena cava creates an impression over here which is directed entirely downwards into the inferior border right over here. Now the arch of azygos vein creates a junction with the superior vena cava. That being said, this is the impressions on the medial surface. Now we will look at the tracheal part over here. If we look at the tracheal part of two lungs, we will see that the bronchus, that the right lung has two bronchus, two primary bronchus, while the left lung has only one primary bronchus. has only one primary or principal, sorry, one principal bronchus, and the right lung has two principal bronchus. Has two principal bronchus. So this left principal bronchus is actually this left principal bronchus is actually a bit more horizontal, while the right principal bronchus is actually a bit more vertical. It's actually a bit shorter and a bit wider, while on the left lung, the left principal bronchus is actually longer and narrower. This identification helps in differentiating the left lung and the right lung. This is the viscera of the entire lung.